For those of you who are watching, hi, my name's Dustin. This is How to Rock Spirit. This is the second part of sort of a two-part video. We're explaining the difference between Prana and Qi, and I have just taken about an hour and a half in the first part to describe the cultural differences between what I consider to be Taoism and Vedanta. We talked about how the esoteric root of both of these cultural lineages stem from a esoteric wisdom, which is a condensation of these different types of knowledge, and that root lies in the ether. That root is a spontaneous expression of the nature of reality as it is. We call it sattva when it is a reality that is naturally abridged. Everything stems from the natural truth. But we have two cultural paradigms, Vedanta and the Tao, which have emphasized two distinct paths of realizing the non-dual. You'll have to excuse me for one sec. Now, these two distinct paths are what we're going to talk about today. And the lineages of those two paths, Vedanta and Tao. Now, the esoteric root can confuse things. What I mean is that, the deeper truth between Prana and Qi the two cultures who have gotten these ideas have dual ways of thinking about what healing is and what self-realization is. Prana comes from Vedanta, as we can see in our little slide here. Prana comes from the lineage of Vedanta, which comes from dharana, from concentration. If you keep concentrating, you keep harnessing your nervous system, eventually it's going to stop leaking energy on its own if you keep really pressing it. And that's when we get something called prana, which is pure awareness energy, because your nervous system has been cultivating and developing the capacity to sustain that concentration to the point where it doesn't even need to try. To me, that is kind of like water. You can have this whole field of seeds, of fertile ground of the body. And if you don't put a lot of water, of concentration power that you've cultivated, prana, if you don't cultivate that prana, you can have all the fertile field, all the seeds that you want. You've got this body that is really conducive to that fertility. Everyone's body is made for this ecstasy, whether you realize it or not. But if you don't concentrate, if you do not do your yoga, if you do not surrender in devotion to a principle which is higher than your subterranean neurological impulses and compulsions, if you do not surrender to something which transcends those short temporary cycles and biorhythms, then all the, the ecstasy and nurturing and fertility available to nature will not get the water that it needs to flower something beautiful. On the other hand, if there is no fertile field, what happens if you take all that water and you just dump it right into the ocean? I mean, everything in the river everything leads to the ocean anyway. But what if there are no fertile fields of nature with which to grow the fertility and abundance of health and wellness and love? What if there is no fertile field with which to take advantage of the concentration and cultivated awareness that you've put so much effort into harnessing? If you don't take care of the body, and if you don't take care of the psyche and of the body's naturalism and of the body's desires, then all of that cultivated water will be wasted. We just talked about in our previous part about how Terence McKenna says that you can go and sweep in the ashrams for a while, and the guru will say, oh, you missed a spot in the corner there. And you can do that for 40 years before you realize the answer that you've been seeking for. Or you can just go into your basement and eat 5 grams of dried psychedelic mushrooms, as Terence says, and you'll see that nature because you are that nature already. The point of the concentration practice was for you to learn how to use your unconscious nature. So both are important. And that is essentially the nature of what we're trying to talk about today. We're talking about prana, which is invoked, cultivated awareness power, cultivated through concentration over much discipline and devotion to a higher ideal throughout one's life. Qi. Qi energy is not the same thing. I like to break Qi down into 2 different things. There's Yang Qi, and then there's Yin Qi. Now, in order for us to talk about the difference between... Now, we just talked about, like, esoteric prana and Qi. Their cultural roots. The world of healing today, what I like to call the wacky world of Western yoga, treats prana a lot like Qi. In fact, I would say that they treat it like Yang Qi, which is just harnessing. It's like pranayama. Pranayama is treated like, it's considered to be like Yang Qi, where you are, Yama is technically the god of death, but what it is, it's observance. It's, Yama in Raja Yoga is a sort of a law or a method of control, an observance. So pranayama is you having yama, which is like a law or a pattern, a way of circulating, harnessing your prana, doing something with your prana. I consider that synonymous with Yang Qi. Yin Qi is when you take that cultivated strength and concentration and awareness. I mean, even the Qigong people, Qi, the Taoists, they use this Yang Qi, and they use it in martial arts, right? You cultivate this internal energy, and you go bang, and you throw a punch, and you kick this guy, and you find ways of using it. And that's just like a warrior conception of what to do with this dharana, with this concentration practice. Yin Qi means that after you've done your Qigong practice, they do a lot of this stuff where you're constantly making this energy circulate through your body. After you've cultivated it in yourself, what you do with Yin Qi is that you mentally imagine circulating it through your body. And that maintains the vehicle of the body for long-term health and wellness of the body. The yogis will just keep hitting the accelerator on the car, even when it goes, I'm dying here, man, and it's falling apart. Oh, it looks like my internet's being a little funky right now. Sorry about that. The yoga people will keep pushing the vehicle even when it starts to go. And that's part of their thing. I'm the master of my body, right? The Taoists, the Qigong people, are interested in taking care of the body. And they will still do this concentration thing just like the yogis will. But they do something that the yogis don't. Maybe I'll leave you at a cliffhanger there. What is it that they do that the yogis don't? We're going to find out in our discussion today, ladies and gentlemen. Prana versus Qi. They are not the same thing. By yours truly, Dustin Cormier. Welcome to How to Rock Spirit. Now, let's see if you guys can see. Yeah, you guys can see what I'm looking at and my things in the corner. Perfect. Now, I've made a fun little metaphor for us today to describe and discuss what this is all about. Yogis are race car drivers, and Taoists are mechanics. Of course, any good race car driver probably has a sense of the mechanics of the car, just like any good mechanic is probably a good driver. If you're interested in the vehicle, if you're interested in the body, for the sake of what you can do with it, then you're going to do the driving as well as the maintaining and taking care. What I say here is Taoists are mechanics, but I tend to say specifically Qigong practitioners. The reason for that is we discussed in our previous in our previous video that the esoteric root of Taoism is essentially the same as the esoteric spiritual root of Vedanta and of yoga, which is Om, which is a sattvic conception of everything being one. What is that everything that is one? It's the two. It's duality. So that's why I say the deep Tao, the esoteric Tao, the Lao Tzu Tao that you might have read in the Tao Te Ching. That's the deep Tao, and that is the Veda. That is Sattva, and it's a philosophical trinary trying to get at the non-dual. But us as health practitioners, that's where I'm coming from with this lecture today. It's from somebody who is not trying to tell people about these deep things that a lot of people won't understand. I think I explained it pretty well in this previous video. But for the sake of most people, like when someone comes to my yoga class, I don't want to give them the whole spiel that I just gave them of the tree, of the split up between the Vedic, Sattvic, ethereal truth, which has come through these two cultures in different ways. I don't want to explain all that. When people come to me for a yoga class or for Qigong, which is not a thing yet, I'm interested in getting into Qigong, they come for the tune-up. they come to learn Qigong, or they come to learn the physical practice of yoga. So this should technically say Qigong practitioners are mechanics. So whenever you see it says Taoists, it comes from Qigong comes from China. We're going to talk about what Qigong means, which is just essentially, Gong is like discipline, and Qi is the energy, the electrical energy circumnavigating the organ systems of the human body. So Gong, like Gong Fu, that we know from the word Kung Fu, is practice of that energy. This is something I've been thinking about, and this says Taoism does not stem from the Veda. I'm working that out. You know, I'm going to massage that out at some point, but the Taoist culture comes from naturalism and original Zen, which is interested in healing the body, and that's what that comes from. Anyway, in any case, if you're truly passionate about self-realization and healing, you should consider both. Okay, so this is a big whole thing that I'm getting pretty Dustin Cormier and esoteric here. It's an interesting image. We won't dwell on it too long because I feel like I really got this esoteric root that I planned to unfold here. We really got it in our last video. We can see prana comes from the sun, and the sun, I've got Saturn in the middle here. Part of that is because it comes from the fact that all of the planets are one non-dual representation of the energy field. Saturn is considered a tamasic planet, which means it represents, as a planet, our unconscious inertias, which we ignore. It's more of an astrology thing, and if you're into astrology, you'll know what I'm talking about, but if you're not, just bear with me. Saturn relates with tamas, and it means that you have things in your life which the sun is the things that you love to do and you express naturally. And you'll never be able to express that sun, the Leo, if you don't integrate the pole of Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn. What I mean by that is that you won't be able to do the things you love in your life, which give you ecstasy and which have a swing to them. The sun things, the things that you love to do if you're an artist and you just love to do your art. If you don't clean the toilet and pick up your crap and organize your paint brushes and your paints, if you can't pay the tax man, if you are unloving to the family that you're in, if you say, screw you, mom and dad, I'm going to go to LA and be an artist or a musician, and you go down there and no one is going to help you because they all came down for the same reason, and now you're screwed because you don't have things. There are things that you're not taking care of. No matter how much sun in your life, no matter how much of your artistic talent you can express through your concentration, if you don't deal with Saturn, if you don't deal with the hard realities in life, you won't cultivate prana. Because prana is when you deal with your nature, you harness your nervous system, and you also harness the things which support what your nervous system is trying to do. And also, Saturn is a metaphor for the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and that relates to Sat, Tat, Om, because Sat is the divine love in us all, Tat is your astrological karma, and Om is Sat, Tat, and the material world all is one, because they're ultimately non-dual. So that's what prana is, and that's what we're going to be getting at in these videos. Prana is essentially when you put concentration practice into harnessing your nervous system, and also to realizing your unconscious inertias Inertias meaning things you ignore in your life unconsciously because you just don't want to deal with them. Everybody has that shadow. That invokes prana. It's because you're going with the nature of your spirit, essentially. But your spirit is being contained by a DNA code. And the spirit's part of the DNA. But there's a material aspect of your DNA, which we all share as human beings. Dogs have their own qigong. You've seen them do downward dog, and they bite their ass and they scratch and they get out whatever's bothering them. And, you know, they love to run and they love to get qi energy going through their different things. They don't have the capacity to intelligently harness and literally cleanse their bodies and organ systems from within, inside out, the way that humans do, because humans have a different type of intelligence, of course. So that's where, you know, you can harness your nervous system through and gain prana, but a lot of the yogic people who invoke this prana are so focused on just burning that concentration. That's all that matters, is that my body's failing, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that I surrender it to God and I devote myself to harnessing my body, even when it goes crazy and says blah, 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 blah. The Qigong people are the people who say, well, if your body's going blah, 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 it means that your liver's probably messed up, man, and you should work on that. And the yogis say, no, I give it up to God because I'm solemn and I can concentrate. And eventually the yogis do get to contemplation. And then they contemplate and they say, oh, maybe I should figure out that liver thing, you know, and they can do that. Just like I said, yogis are drivers, but most race car drivers know a thing or two about being a mechanic. So yogis will figure that out. But the Qigong people say, you are wasting your time with that concentration bit if your liver's out of whack and it's not flowing with the qi energy of your kidneys. And your kidney energy is being blocked by an obstructed spleen, earth qi, and these sorts of things. Now, I've got this whole thing that I might not even want to go through. I've planned this whole video, and I think that I've said all the stuff that you're going to see here. Let me just say first that this Qigong thing is what I'm talking about, that the yogis are missing out on. And they really are. As someone who has been very interested in this Qigong dimension of reality lately, I'm trying to ring the bell for yoga, the yoga world here. Because there is something that Chinese medicine wants to give us that we have to be open to. Because in the same way that people are weird, you know, Western consciousness is weird about prana in general. And what the West did was that they took out all the mysticism of this sun thing that I was talking about. They took out all of the mystical crap that can't be evidently explained by analytical physical proof and science. They took it all out and said, well, what's prana? If you breathe in and you hold that breath energy in, oxygen goes to your brain and you cultivate concentration in your nerves. So that's what Western science is calling prana, is just like cultivated neurological discipline. And it has become synonymous with qi because of the way they've hacked away at what prana could be as an extension of Raja Yoga and of pranayama and of these dimensions of pure awareness, which I sort of call spirit. I'm careful to dichotomize them because, again, they're non-dual. Anyway, So the wacky world of Western yoga considers prana and qi to be the same thing, right? Prana is something more mystical than most people consider it. And the people in the yoga world who say, why don't you do some pranayama and just sit down and breathe and calm down? Because when you breathe, it does ventilate your nervous system and it gives you a certain release. That's not really what prana is, but the people in the Western world of yoga call it that. And it's become synonymous with qi. Now, I think it's closer to qi. When you start to circulate, when you do pranayama in the sense that people think of it, it's essentially qigong, which is that you breathe and you regulate the subconscious motions of your emotional neuromatrix through integrating your consciousness through the breath, because the breath is the doorway to that organically breathing biorhythm of breath and neuroware. It's qigong is what that is. So that's what this whole thing is, right? If you'd like, you can pause the video and read all this, but I've essentially gone through it already, so we won't dwell too long on it. But an important point for us to read is that prana is often confused with the vitalizing earthly resolution of bodily needs. The body sustains the work of the soul. But vitality, vitalizing, revitalizing from in the earth sense, actually conscientiously taking care of that liver problem or the flow between the 5 psychedelic organs of the body and their meridians. This is not the same as prana, which is vitality from the soul. How I like to, I will say this point that I think is important. We've got a lot to go through, so I won't dwell too long on all this, but essentially, prana to me, okay, think about a cardboard box on the highway. You've got a bass amp in this cardboard box. Now, you've got an engine. Let's say you've got a Ferrari engine inside this cardboard box. And you put the Ferrari engine in there, and you want to get the bass amp from A to B. Let's say it's 10 kilometers, and you want to do it in 15 minutes. Well, what you got to do, if you've got a cardboard box, the wind is going to hit the flat face of the cardboard box. So you've got this engine that's revving at, I don't know, I'm not a mechanic, like 2,000 RPMs, right? Just to push this flat-faced cardboard box hard enough that it goes through the friction of the air, and it's you want it to get it there in 15 minutes. 10 kilometers in 15 minutes, okay? In a cardboard box. It's got to press through the atmosphere. Prana is when you make a concave, you cut that cardboard box so that it looks like a Ferrari. A Ferrari is built to cut through the air. It's very smooth, and it's got these concave curves that the air cuts through. Now, if you want to go 10 kilometers in 15 minutes with that Ferrari engine in that Ferrari, you'll go the same amount of distance in the same amount of time as the cardboard box. But you'll have to work way less because the Ferrari doesn't have to bash against the friction of the atmosphere so much. That is prana. Okay? So let's say you've only got a gallon of fuel in the engine. When you put the gallon of fuel in the Ferrari engine in the cardboard box, you drive 10 kilometers in 15 minutes. And you look at the engine, and half or 3/4 of the tank of gas is gone. Now, you put the same engine with the same gallon of gas in a Ferrari with all its curves, and it's smooth, and it cuts through the air like a hot knife through butter. You go 10 kilometers in 15 minutes, the same distance in the same amount of time. You get to the end and you look inside the engine, and only a quarter of the tank is gone, because of the way the Ferrari fitted itself to its course, to its destiny. It cut through the air. It did the same thing, but it used much less energy. Where did that energy come from? The Western people say, oh, look, it gained prana. But the truth of the matter is that it's more like it didn't lose prana. That's what prana is. Prana is this miraculous thing where it gained that extra fuel. Qi energy is, yang qi is like what qi energy is the engine revving, right? The cardboard box had to go vroom, vroom, and it really had to push through that atmosphere. And it had to, and that's yang qi. That's energy invoked and pushed through that atmosphere. So the qi energy circulating through the body's organs was the same on both trips. It was the prana that allowed the car to be cut in a certain way that it could get from A to B with less crap, But the amount of qi energy being pushed was probably more in the crappy vehicle, So this is the point, is that if you don't do yoga, you'll do qi kung, but you won't have self-realization. You won't concave your vehicle to fit your destiny, which is more of like what Vedanta and astrology, Vedic astrology and tropical astrology are all about. Qi Kung is more about, how do I learn to maintain this engine going at 2,000 RPMs, or however much it has to go per minute or whatever it is. The Qi Kung people are more interested in the longevity of the engine. They're not looking at the shape of the vehicle. They're not looking at how they can fit themselves to destiny as much. Although they have their own astrology. It's called Ba Zi. And it's sort of like a similar thing, but Ba Zi is more like learning that, I don't know, an engine's got lots of different parts. So Ba Zi, when you look at Ba Zi, which is Chinese astrology, and you look, and it's got its own science that I've made a video about. If you can check out my Chinese astrology series on my channel. The Chinese astrology, if you've got a water day stem, I'm born in the day of the water horse, and I'm born in the month. If you're not an astrologer, just bear with me, because these two cultural items are important to the consciousness of prana and qi that we're trying to describe. If you ask a Qi Kung practitioner what the depths of Qi Kung are all about, they probably will try to get away from astrology because it's mystical. Guys like Dr. Yang Zhuang Ming, who's someone I'll mention in a bit, he tries to, when he's dealing with the West, he knows that they don't like this mysticism of everything being non-dual, and the ergoplastic neuroconsciousness of the body that is one unified pentastar, but which manifests as the millions of different cells and organelles that the West sees, you know? What I should say is that in this example, the engine, an engine has so many different parts. We've got the cardboard box and we've got the Ferrari. The Ferrari is what cultivated the prana. But they both have an engine. And the Taoists say you can push the crappy cardboard box that's not aerodynamic. That was the word I was looking for. The cardboard box is not aerodynamic. And if you've been given a cardboard box in your reality, you don't need to go at the same speed as the yoga Ferrari, because your nature is conducive to what your body is. So don't worry about pushing it so hard. What you should do instead is to clean out the engine. You should make sure that you maintain the engine inside that vehicle. And when the rotator thing, oh God, I wish I was a mechanic. Yeah, I'm not a mechanic. But when the spinning gear thing starts to chunk, clean it. Go into the body, work out that particular vital organ that's losing its full function, clean it out and deal with it, and then go to the next one. The motor, right? The motor, that's a thing that vehicles have, right? When the motor starts to stop and click, work that out. And the engine will ultimately be sustained for longer, and it will maintain its optimal integral state of health and wellness because you took care of the science and individual mechanisms of that engine and of the body. That's what Qigong's all about. And that's what I was trying to say with the Taoist astrology thing. Again, if you're not an astrologer, just bear with me. I was born in the day of the water horse, and I was born in the month of the boar. So I have a big emphasis on water, which is a big kidney energy emphasis. And it's very passive, and it's sort of just like, it kind of lacks like earth. I've thankfully got some earth in my chart, but a lot of the times I can be very scattered because my interest is in this watery, going type of energy. And that can be okay as long as I balance all the parts of my engine. That's what Chinese astrology is all about. That's what Taoist energy healing is focused on. You look at the Ba-Zi chart, which is the Chinese astrology chart. You see when there's a missing element, and you consciously work out the fact that, you could even have something. It's sort of like Ayurveda in the sense that, like I could have some red in my life. I like to wear red because my day branch is the horse, and it just makes me feel empowered about that dynamic in my personality. I also like to have these brown earthy walls in my basement in my room because they have an earth consciousness, and they ground me in the fact that, I've got so much water that I need more earth. And that might even manifest as like an overproductive kidney and a underproductive spleen, because the spleen resonates with the energy of earth qi, right? So they say that it's good for people who are lacking earth to eat things like rice and wheat and potatoes and root vegetables. People who lack water, they need more things like, earthy greens and stuff. And certain, yeah. Anyway, so this is how the Chinese astrology thinks. And this is also how Qigong practitioners think, except that they usually get at it without the astrology. They do it in a Reiki sort of way, where they talk to a person and the person says, yeah, this is what my life is all about. I do this and I do this and I do this, and then the Qi Kung master would look at you and say, okay, well, why don't you try this practice, And then so you go and you do the thing, the Qi Kung thing, and maybe the person goes, oh, okay, I'm getting bored of this. Why don't we just, let's just fucking do the thing. Let's just spin the wheel. And the Qi Kung master says, well, you might have a bit too much fire in your chart. You might have a bit too much heart energy, and you can cool that, and that will help you find a balance in your subliminal neuroware. That is the Qigong practitioner working out the engine, which is conducive to the nature of the body and of naturalism. It's a pretty different metaphysical science from like Ayurveda and from the whole Vedic thing. But I think it's very important for anybody who's interested in it. Now, I'm trying to make this enticing to yogis to see, oh, maybe he's got something about this Qigong thing. So I don't want to rap too much because I've got a little bit of a thing prepared, and hopefully this thing that I've prepared is going to carry us even further than me just yapping. So in the end, I may have to refer to prana as anatomically similar to what is called yang qi in this presentation, because in the wacky world of Western yoga, physical hatha yoga practitioners have made a habit of considering prana to simply mean vitality of any sort. But the vitality that I was talking about from the aerodynamic nature of the Ferrari is different from the vitality of actually fixing the engine, right? I hope you guys can see that difference. Let me just make that one last point. Prana comes when you don't lose prana. Qi comes when you consciously vitalize your body with qi, and then you, with your discerning intelligence, you circumnavigate it through the body, particularly where there are parts of the body that are lacking that neuroelectric flow of cellular energy. And that's more of a constant maintenance as opposed to a life change that comes from not losing prana. Hopefully I've made that clear. Now, I'm a registered yoga teacher 200 yoga practitioner. I'm actually getting my thing in November. But I pretty much got it, which I'm happy about. It's taken me all year to do it. So we're describing prana and pranayama as I often find it described in the wacky world of Western yoga. I mean this insofar as prana is described as the inspiration of the breath, an anchor of what's called the pranamaya kosha, which is the energetic emotional sphere, in order to vitalize the body. I would say this is incorrectly synonymous with yang qi, the way that most Westerners think of prana and pranayama. And then I say, I did a lot of this presentation without thinking I would do the intro, so you guys can see the esoteric difference between prana as it really is, an esoteric yoga, and prana as Western yogis use it. Hatha yoga, in the Western sense, we're talking about Western yoga. Through hatha yoga, it's physical asana, and more specifically, pranayama, the concentration and integration of the self into the body. Through this concentration practice, a yogi can teach you to harness your vehicle, how to memorize that perfect shift between first and second gear and then third gear. Yogis are race car drivers, right? Yoga shows you how to handle the vehicle smoothly, how to swerve on the racetrack of life gracefully, how to rev your engine, how to effectively apply willpower, and even to cultivate willpower. That's yang yoga. When we think of yang yoga, it's the warrior yoga, and you're doing all this stuff and you're not giving up and your body's flagging, but you're like, oh, it's okay. I'm an expert driver. I can do this. And that's yang yoga, but yin yoga also tells us when to pump the brakes. Yeah, you know, yin yoga is actually a beautiful thing, because what you do is you do these slow, cultivated, calculated postures. You go to do a forward bend, or, you know, like, there's so many types of yin postures. Every posture, in fact, you can come at it from a yang or a yin way. You could do a yin warrior series if you wanted to, if the intention was to learn how to pump the brakes. Learn how to, as opposed to yang yoga, which is like punching against your body's inclination. Ah! I just realized that I wasn't. Oh, that's why I'm always trying to. It's okay. I've got a whole presentation here, folks, and I thought that you guys were watching it with me. It's okay. If you've been listening, then you'll see what I've been getting at anyway. This is the page that you were supposed to be just watching. So yang yoga is more about blasting through your tired neurosystem and teaching it to, like, come on, keep up with my indomitable spirit. Yin yoga says, all right, slow that indomitable spirit down before you freaking hurt yourself. Yin yoga is cultivating calmness in the face of awareness and concentration. And yang and yin yoga are both important. That's why it's called hatha yoga. Ha means the sun, tha means the moon. The keynote of yoga in this sense is mindfulness of the mind and subconscious, harnessing neurological control of the mind and the emotions. It's how you handle the vehicle and how you swerve on the racetrack of life gracefully. Prana habits, or, you know, this prana, as the West calls it, yang Qi, or yang yoga. These habits vitalize strength and endurance in the short term. Yang yoga. Pranayama, now we can see, as I said, prana is vitalizing energy, and yama is obeisance-controlled discipline. So basically, pranayama is like breath practice, as Western yogis use it. It's, you know, the name of the pranayama game is to realize that the maya kosha, or the physical body, the mana maya kosha, is a chariot, which is subservient to the charioteer of the soul. And I've taken a little thing from an astrological writer named Ernst Wilhelm. He has described that the Indian people are of the nature of the sun. The sun represents the king of the soul, the astral field, which we call tat. It's your ongoing... It's a part of your DNA that has been building towards a certain directional axis, and it keeps compiling in certain dimensions of life. With love, you deal with it in a certain way. With work, you deal with it in a certain way, and everyone has to prioritize all these needs and to keep them flowing along in a cycle. Yoga people are of the sun, which says, this is, you know, my soul wants to do this. It doesn't matter what my body is doing or flaking or whatever. What matters is that my soul is doing this, and this is what I am determined to concentrate towards. So For yogis, the body's gross nature... Again, I've got to check this again. Okay, good. I got it now. The body's gross nature must be harnessed and calm in order to meditate on the subterranean motions occurring transcarnationally in one's energy field. That's yoga's deep esoteric meaning. You calm the subliminal motions of the body, and yoga happens, because then you can learn what do I want to do on top of my my habits, on top of the fact that I just feel like having a drink right now. You know, I don't feel like sitting down and meditating and contemplating. I just feel like having a drink or smoking a joint or getting away from this annoying nagging consciousness, right? So that's what yoga's all about. And I should say, even a driver that knows nothing about mechanics can still sense when they're pushing their car too hard. A Western yogi does become sensitive to the vehicle and to the engine, and they learn not to push themselves too hard if they're true yogis, since yoga is the union of opposites. But sometimes the car breaks down, and the race car specialist, the one who specializes in driving, that's what yoga is all about, he might not know why. So he has to stop pushing himself at that point, or else he might destroy the internal physical hardware of the vehicle, no matter how much he meditates and concentrates, and pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes. And when this happens, they go to see a mechanic, you know. I mean, you can't... Certain crazy, super sagacious yogis in the past used to be able to, like, you know, stupid old stories from Yogananda where, like, this yogi was like, oh, geez, I got some problems in my small intestines. I'm just going to cut that out. Just, you know, like wash it in the water, you know, just wash out what's going on there and put it back in, sew it up, and I'm good to go because I'm a super yogi, whatever. You know, ultimately, that for most of us, when a yogi pushes himself too hard as a race car driver, you got to go see a doctor. It might not be good. If you've been, you know, this is the reason why I'm talking about why Qi Kung and Chinese energy healing is so important. When this happens, the car breaks down and they need to go and see a mechanic. There might be some yogis have a lot, and I'm going to talk about how, like, yeah, I'll get that in the next thing. Yogis get a grip of their own vehicle, but they do not specialize in knowing the fundamental dynamics interwoven into the organism. Blah. Yogis get a grip of their own vehicle, but they do not specialize in knowing the fundamental dynamics interwoven into the organ systems of every car that exists. A yogi knows that how, you know, he's memorized the distance between his accelerator pedal, his gear shift, and the gear shift of his drive shaft stick thing. You know what I mean? He knows in this car, he's done it so many times. First gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, boom, you know? And if he has to go into another car, into another body, he'll figure it out real quick. Incarnation after incarnation, you learn how to deal with your own body, at least, for sure. But you might not necessarily get a sense of what's the difference between a transmission and a drivetrain or whatever. Again, I'm not a mechanic, so, you know, yogis don't necessarily learn the fundamental dynamics interwoven into the interorganic organ systems of the vehicle. Now, for the Western yogis watching, remember that I'm a yoga guy myself, and I know that yoga does some incredible things for the body. There are anatomical realities of the human body which yogis are even more familiar with than Taoists are. The Taoists don't get into the hips like the yogis do, in my experience. They don't have a... Western yoga has its great stuff. Like, there's a guy named Paul Grilly that's out right now that really does some incredible work describing the nature of the body, including the fact of the muscle fascia, When you go to bed, this fascia develops, and if you don't stretch that fascia, then it'll compile there over time to the point where, you know, you become like locked into this facial structure because you've never worked it out in a way to work it out. Yogis are particularly sensitive to this. Taoists and Qigong practitioners, they don't know the natural back and forward bends of the spine like yogis do. Or probably the same thing with twists and side bends and the seventh dimension of the spine, which is extension and elongation. They don't know the individual limits of their own tendons and muscle fascia quite like a yogi does. Although they do get a lot of that. The Taoists have all that conception. In some ways more, but in some ways less. Yogis, there are things anatomically that yogis know, which a race car driver knows. If a mechanic has never actually taken the thing out on the road, he's looking at this engine and saying, well, I know the theory behind it all. But the race car driver is the guy who's like, you know, when that transmission shifts into that second gear and it does this thing, like I just know in my head that it has to slide in this certain perfect way. If I was a mechanic, I could make a better metaphor about this, but knowledge of these can help the yogi in their practice. There are things that, you know, yogis do that do reduce the damage that racing causes their vehicle. Yoga helps the driver and the vehicle sustain high speeds. In other words, it's for meditation and concentration again. That's what yoga's for, is maintaining the high speed in the vehicle. It's not necessarily for maintaining. And I should make a point about Ayurveda, because Ayurveda teaches yogis through the Indian Hindu tradition to put in good fuel, which is sattvic food and lots of breath into the vehicle. Sattvic foods is clean, raw, pure, less salt and bad fats, less cholesterol, more nutrients per weight, and rawness. These are pranic. We get vitality out of them because when you eat sattvic food, it makes it easier for the mind to summon electrical vital energy from the cells and to invoke more of the short-term power that yoga is emphasized on, that short-term endurance. Pranayama turns this into a habit. And that's the conception of pranayama, is you're controlling the dimension of how much energy you're losing by eating bad food, or how much energy you're losing by not cultivating concentration. Prana means there's less garbage blocking the neurological ventilation of the mind when acting through the body. So sattvic foods do invoke prana, but it's not because we gain energy. It's more about like we lose less energy. Again, that's the emphasis I want to put on prana. Now, how are we doing here, folks? I just want to do a quick peek. Now, we've just talked all about prana. Our friend Aquarian Age has asked, what is Qi? We've been talking, that's nice that you asked that, Aquarian Age. And our friend Miss Bright loves doing yoga. I'm glad to hear that. Because yoga is very special, you know. I'm breaking these down as a sort of like a dichotomy. And I'm a yogi. I'm not a Qigong practitioner just yet. I'm coming at this whole thing as a yogi trying to bring Qigong into the yoga world. That is my bias.